Today is July 5th, and on Today in Murder, we discuss a tragic shooting by the hands of the infamous unsolved serial killer known as the Zodiac Killer. For those of you who don't know, the Zodiac Killer was the pseudonym of the unidentified serial killer in Northern California in the 1960s. Although it's theorized the Zodiac killed upwards of 35 people, there's only 5 known murders committed by the mysterious killer. During the Zodiac killings, 3 couples were targeted as well as a male cab driver. What makes this case so famous is people want answers. People don't like when something remains unknown. He coined the name the Zodiac in a series of taunting letters that he mailed to regional newspapers in the San Francisco area. In these letters, he threatened killing sprees and bombings if they were not printed into the paper. Part of why this case is so famous is some of the letters include cryptograms or ciphers in which the killer claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. The Zodiac published 4 ciphers. Of the 4 ciphers he produced, 2 are still unsolved to this day. While the others were cracked in 1969 and 2020, retired military, policemen, and amateur puzzle enthusiasts still work on these 2 ciphers today. The last confirmed Zodiac letter was in 1974. That's when he claimed to have killed 37 victims. He claimed many of them were in Southern California, including Sherry Jo Bates, who was murdered in Riverside in 1966. Although to this day a connection between the 2 has not been proven, while many theories regarding the identity of the Zodiac have been suggested, the only suspect anyone ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur was a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1992. Now let's get into that murder. While they weren't the first killed by the Zodiac, this couple met the same unfortunate fate many others would. The couple Darlene Ferrin and Mageau met at Ferrin's work at a local restaurant. They became friends, and after one thing led to another, despite still being married, Ferrin received a phone call around 11:30 p.m. on July 4th from Michael. That's when Ferrin left home and drove to Michael's house, arriving around 11:50. After this moment, the facts of the case become a bit tricky. There's conflicting information and statements, but we'll just move on with that in mind. Sometime after 11:50 p.m. July 4th, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau left in Darlene's car and immediately noticed someone following them in a light-colored car. That's when Darlene started driving out of town towards Blue Rock Springs Park. At around midnight, July 5th, the couple pulled into an empty parking lot here at Blue Rock Springs Park. This was a popular area for couples to come fool around or just hang out. Soon after arriving, another vehicle pulled in and parked less than 100 feet away. They didn't know who it was, but they knew it was a man. He turned the headlights off and sat completely still in his seat. That's when Michael asked, "Who is that?" Darlene allegedly said that they shouldn't worry about it. At that point, the driver then sped out of the parking lot at a high speed. After the car leaves, the couple are sitting in their vehicle. 5 minutes later, the car returned and parked just a few feet away from Darlene's on the passenger side. That's when he exited his car and approached. The man shined a flashlight into the car. The couple at this point just assumed he was a police officer and rolled down the window. The man didn't say a word. He then fired his gun into the car. One bullet hit Michael in the right arm and the other hit Darlene in the neck. This caused her to slump towards the steering wheel and become motionless. Michael tried to leave the car, but the door handle on the passenger side was either missing or removed. The shooter then stepped away from Darlene's car and went back to his own. But he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he opened his car door and did something unknown that Michael couldn't make out. He looked back at Michael, visibly struggling to get out of the car, and rushed back over to him. 4 more shots were fired, 2 at each person. The shooter then moved quickly back to his car and drove off. The shooting was heard by a golf course caretaker nearby, who estimated that it was at 12:10 a.m. on July 5th. The killer left no clues that could be traced back to him. Soon after the shooting, another couple arrived in the parking lot and noticed the couple shot. This couple left immediately to call for help. with police arriving at around 12:20 a.m. The couple was taken to the hospital where Michael survived, but Darlene unfortunately was pronounced dead at 12:40 a.m. Michael's description of the shooter is the famous sketch you've probably seen in the Zodiac case. Soon after the shooting, the Zodiac sends his first encrypted letters to the San Francisco newspapers. In the 3 letters, he took credit for the previous Lake Herman shooting and the Darlene and Michael slaying we just discussed. Here, he explained that he was killing victims to collect them as his personal slaves in the afterlife. The killer demanded that they be printed on each paper's front page. If not, he would, quote, cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again, until I end up with 12 people over the weekend. They posted his letter on page 4 with a quote from the police chief stating they are not satisfied with the confession and they need more information to prove that he's the murderer. He did just that, but that's for another episode. Today, on July 5th, I'm your host Dawson Toller, and on Today in Murder, that was the tragic Zodiac shooting of Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau.